Codependent No More, How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Caring for Yourself by Melody Beattie. Let me tell you about Jessica. She's sitting in her kitchen on what should be a beautiful day. The sun is streaming through the windows, but somehow, everything around her feels gray. There are dishes stacked in the sink, laundry piling up in the corner, but she can't bring herself to move. It's like there's an invisible weight pressing down on her shoulders, and honestly, just the thought of brushing her hair feels like trying to scale Mount Everest. So she crawls back into bed. It's her only refuge. But when she wakes up, all those feelings come rushing back like a tidal wave. Fury at her husband for his drinking and the lies that came with it, despair that even God seems to have forgotten about her, and this gnawing fear that she's completely stuck with no exit door in sight. The thought keeps circling in her mind. It's all his fault. If he would just get better, then I would feel better. But here's where things get interesting. Her husband actually is getting better. He's been sober for 6 whole months, faithfully attending his Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He's genuinely changing. But Jessica? She's not. In fact, she's feeling worse than ever. The anger, the bone-deep exhaustion, the feeling of being completely used up and invisible, none of it has gone away. And she's starting to ask herself the most terrifying question imaginable. What if he isn't the problem anymore? What if the problem is actually me? Jessica's story sits at the heart of a book that dropped in 1986 like a quiet revelation, and has since sold over 5 million copies around the world. We're talking about Codependent No More, and its author, Melody Beattie, didn't just observe this struggle from a distance. She lived through it. She was an alcoholic and addict herself, someone who basically created the exact kind of chaos she would later write about. She survived addiction, abuse, divorce, and even the devastating loss of her young son. She wrote this entire book while on welfare, a single mom trying to piece together her own shattered life. What she discovered, and then generously shared with all of us, was a name for that invisible force that had trapped Jessica and millions of others like her. A force that makes us care so intensely about other people that we completely forget to care for ourselves. A force that transforms love into control and compassion into complete exhaustion. She called it codependency. Today, we're going to dive deep into this landmark book. And I promise you, by the time we're done here, you'll understand this powerful dynamic that shapes so many of our relationships, often without us having the slightest clue it's even happening. More importantly, you'll learn the first crucial steps to breaking free, finding your balance again, and learning how to actually live your own life, fully, joyfully, and on your own terms. Have you ever noticed that your entire mood for the day hangs on someone else's emotional state? Maybe it's your parent, your best friend, or your partner. If they're in a good mood, you can finally breathe and relax. But the moment they seem upset, you feel this urgent, almost panicky need to fix it, to make everything better. You feel responsible for their happiness. Or maybe you've known someone like Gerald. This guy had it all. Good looks, successful career, could have dated pretty much anyone he wanted. But somehow, he kept falling for women who treated him terribly. Women who were battling their own demons with addiction. He'd pour all his energy into trying to help them, trying to control their drinking, only to end up feeling angry and hurt, asking himself, why does this keep happening to me? These stories, along with Jessica's, all point to the same quiet struggle happening beneath the surface. Melody Beattie defines a codependent person with this beautiful simplicity. It's someone who has let another person's behavior completely affect them, and who becomes obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. And here's the thing. It's not just about being in a relationship with an alcoholic, though that's where the term first came from. This can happen with anyone. A parent dealing with chronic illness, a teenager going through their rebellious phase, a friend who's always drowning in some new crisis, or even a perfectly normal person whose moods you absorb like an emotional sponge. At its core, codependency is all about reaction. Codependents don't act, they react. They're constantly reacting to other people's problems, feelings, and choices. They spend so much time reacting to everyone around them that they completely forget to actually live their own life. So what does this look like in real life? The book lays out some powerful and often uncomfortably familiar characteristics. Let's think of them not as some checklist to label yourself with, but as signposts on a map that might help you understand the territory you're navigating. The first and most powerful signpost is what Beattie calls caretaking. This isn't the same thing as genuine, healthy caring for someone. Caretaking is this compulsive need to manage everyone else's lives. Codependents feel responsible for other people's feelings, their thoughts, even their destiny. They anticipate needs before they're even expressed. They say yes when every fiber of their being is screaming no. They do way more than their fair share of work, and then feel angry and resentful when nobody returns the favor. This pattern creates something the book calls the Karpman drama triangle, which is basically a toxic dance involving three roles: the rescuer, the persecutor, and the victim. As codependents, we absolutely love starting out as the rescuer. We jump in to solve someone else's problem, often a problem they could and should solve themselves. We do it because it gives us this temporary hit of self-worth. Deep down, we don't feel lovable, so we settle for being needed instead. But here's the trap. The person we rescue rarely appreciates it the way we think they should. They might even resent it, because our help sends this subtle message: you're incompetent. You can't handle your own life. When they don't show enough gratitude, or when our help doesn't magically fix everything, we shift roles. We become the persecutor. We get angry, resentful, critical. After everything I've done for you, we think bitterly, this is the thanks I get? And that leads us straight to the final, inevitable role, the victim. We feel used, unappreciated, helpless, drowning in self-pity. We wonder, why does this always happen to me? The heartbreaking irony? We set this whole exhausting cycle in motion ourselves by taking on a responsibility that was never ours to begin with. This leads us to the second major signpost: a deep-seated feeling of low self-worth. Codependents are relentlessly, brutally hard on themselves. They blame themselves for absolutely everything. They reject compliments, completely convinced they're not good enough. Many come from dysfunctional families where their needs weren't met, and they carry this feeling of being unimportant into their adult lives like heavy baggage. They don't feel worthy of good things, so they get their sense of value from helping others. But it's artificial self-worth, the kind that evaporates the instant the person they're helping fails or rejects them. The third signpost is the anxious mind, which shows up as obsession and control. Because the world around them feels so chaotic and out of control, especially when living with someone who's unpredictable, codependents try to manage absolutely everything. They worry constantly. They check up on people. They try to catch them in the act of misbehaving. Their minds are like hamsters on a wheel, endlessly spinning with thoughts about what someone else is doing, thinking, or feeling. They believe, deep down in their bones, that they know best how things should turn out, and they try to control people through guilt, manipulation, constant advice-giving, or even by playing helpless. But here's the reality. Control is an illusion. Melody Beattie tells this story about Maria, whose husband was a binge drinker. He only seemed to drink when she wasn't around, so Maria made what seemed like a logical decision. To control his drinking, she would never leave his side. She became a recluse, turning down travel opportunities, church conferences, even simple trips to the grocery store. She basically became a guard in her own home. But of course, he still found ways to drink. Then one day, he told her that if she got a job to help with their mounting financial stress, he wouldn't feel the need to drink anymore. Reluctantly, she agreed. And something unexpected happened. She started to thrive. She was good at her job. She enjoyed the people. She felt glimpses of her old self coming back to life. But soon enough, that familiar anxiety crept back in. Her husband was about to drink again. She started making frantic phone calls. He wasn't at work. He hadn't picked up the kids. The next morning, she walked into her new job and quit on the spot. Rushing back home to resume her guard duty, she thought she was controlling him. But who was really in control here? His alcoholism was controlling her. It dictated where she went, what she did, and how she felt every single moment. In her attempt to control him, she had completely lost control of her own life. The final signpost is what makes all of this possible, an emotional shutdown. This shows up as repression and denial. To survive the constant pain, disappointment, and chaos, many codependents learn to push their feelings way down deep. They become afraid to be who they really are. They ignore problems or pretend they aren't happening. They tell themselves things will magically be better tomorrow. They feel crazy because they're living in a world built on lies, both the ones they're told and the ones they tell themselves. They don't even know what they're feeling anymore. As one woman in the book puts it, I used to openly express my emotions. Now, after 8 years in this relationship, I couldn't tell you what I was feeling if my life depended on it. So if this is the trap, this exhausting cycle of caretaking, low self-worth, control, and denial, how do we escape? This is where the book shifts from diagnosis to healing, and the journey begins with one deceptively simple yet profoundly powerful concept: detachment. Now, when most people hear detachment, they immediately think of being cold, distant, uncaring. But Beattie is crystal clear. That's absolutely not what this means. Detachment isn't some hostile withdrawal. It isn't giving up in despair. As one Al-Anon member beautifully put it, it's not about detaching from the person you care about, but from the agony of being so entangled with them. Detachment is the act of mentally, emotionally, and sometimes physically disengaging from the unhealthy entanglement with another person's life and responsibilities. It's based on this radical premise: each person is responsible for themselves. We can't solve problems that aren't ours to solve. And here's the kicker: worrying doesn't actually help. Detachment means you adopt a hands-off policy. You allow people to face the natural consequences of their own actions. You let them be who they are, giving them the freedom to grow, and crucially, you give yourself that same freedom. You do what you can reasonably do to solve a problem, and then you let it go. You focus on what's actually good in your life right now, and you learn to live despite having unsolved problems hanging around. It's about learning not to be blown around by every emotional wind. Most codependents live in a constant state of reaction. Someone's angry, so you become anxious. Someone's sad, so you feel compelled to cheer them up immediately. You're basically forfeiting your own peace at the whim of your environment. Detachment is about reclaiming that peace. It's learning to pause before you react. And in that pause, you'll find your power. You get to choose how you want to feel, think, and act, instead of letting someone else's behavior dictate your entire existence. Once we begin practicing detachment, the next step becomes possible: to set yourself free. This is about releasing that illusion of control. You can't control another person's drinking, their eating habits, their choices, their feelings, or their thoughts. You just can't. And the moment you stop trying to do the impossible, you free up this enormous amount of energy to do the possible. Change yourself. This frees you to focus on the only person you truly have any business controlling, yourself. This is the beating heart of the book's message. It's a shift from being other-centered to being self-centered, not in a selfish, narcissistic way, but in a genuine self-caring way. It's about learning to live your own life. For many codependents, this is genuinely terrifying. They've been so wrapped up in other people for so long that they've completely forgotten who they are. They don't know what they want or need anymore. The book's advice is beautifully simple. Start asking. In any given situation, detach and ask yourself, what do I need to do right now to take care of myself? Maybe the answer is to take a walk. Maybe it's finally saying no to a request. Maybe it's making that doctor's appointment you've been putting off for months. It's about learning to listen to that quiet inner voice you've been ignoring for far too long. And a huge part of learning to listen to that voice is learning to have a love affair with yourself. This means dismantling that cruel inner critic that constantly tells you you're not good enough. It means accepting yourself, flaws and all. It means understanding that you are not a mistake. You are worthy of love, happiness, and a life that's genuinely your own, not just some extension of someone else's existence. Of course, this journey isn't a straight line. It's a process of learning to feel again. Codependents are absolute masters at repressing their emotions. The book encourages us to gently welcome them back, all of them, especially the most difficult one, anger. Many codependents are absolutely terrified of anger, both their own and other people's. But Beattie makes this powerful point. Of course you're angry. Anyone who has tolerated what you've tolerated would be angry too. Anger is a signal. It's telling you that a boundary has been crossed, that a need isn't being met. The goal isn't to stop being angry. It's to learn how to listen to your anger and use its energy to take responsible action to care for yourself. Finally, the book gently points toward a powerful resource for this journey: 12-step programs. Programs like Al-Anon, which is specifically for families and friends of alcoholics, are built on these same principles of detachment, self-care, and spiritual reliance that fill every page of Codependent No More. Beattie shares this beautiful analogy for how these programs work, something she heard at a meeting. Imagine you're standing on a shore, and across the water is an island called Serenity. You desperately want to get there. You have two options. There's this big, fancy ocean liner called Therapy, and it looks absolutely amazing. Then there's a group of people on the beach who look like they're rowing. But here's the weird thing. You can't see a boat or any oars. They're just sitting there, happily rowing an invisible boat. You naturally choose the ocean liner. It takes you halfway across the water, but then it stops dead, turns around, and brings you right back to shore. The captain tells you, "Sorry, our cruise only goes so far. The only way to actually get to that island is in that invisible boat." So you walk over to the people on the beach, feeling pretty skeptical. They tell you to get in. You say you can't see the boat. They say get in anyway. They tell you to pick up an oar and start rowing. You say you can't see the oars. They say pick them up and row anyway. And so you do. You start going through the motions, feeling a bit ridiculous. And pretty soon you start to see the boat taking shape. Then you see the oars materializing in your hands. And before you know it, you're so genuinely happy, just rowing alongside these people, that you almost don't care if you ever actually reach the island. That's the journey of recovery from codependency. It's about taking steps you might not fully understand at first, trusting a process that seems invisible, and discovering that the real destination isn't some far-off island of perfection. The real treasure is the peace and strength you discover within yourself along the way. It's about learning to live and love again, but this time in a way that includes loving yourself too. When you step back and really look at Codependent No More, you realize it's so much more than just another self-help book from the 80s. It's a timeless manual for anyone who has ever loved someone so intensely that they completely lost themselves in the process. Its message is, in many ways, even more critical today than when it was first written. We live in a culture that often glorifies self-sacrifice, especially in relationships. We're constantly told that love means putting someone else's needs before our own, always and without question. But Melody Beattie draws this crucial line in the sand. She shows us the vital difference between healthy, compassionate giving and the self-destructive pattern of caretaking that ultimately depletes us and actually enables the very behavior we're desperately trying to stop. The most powerful lesson for me is the paradox of control. The book brilliantly illustrates that the more we try to control another person, the more we end up being controlled by them. Our every thought, every action, every emotion becomes just a reaction to them. We become puppets, and their problems are pulling all the strings. The only way to cut those strings is to let go, to genuinely practice detachment. This isn't about giving up on people you love. It's about giving up the exhausting illusion that you can somehow run their lives for them. It's about having the courage to say, "I love you, and because I love you, I will not stand between you and the natural consequences of your choices. And because I love myself, I will no longer allow your choices to destroy my peace." That's a profound act of love for both people involved. So how can you start applying these ideas in your own life, right now, today? It doesn't require some dramatic life overhaul. It starts with small, quiet shifts. Here are 3 simple actions you can take immediately. First, practice the pause. The next time you feel that frantic urge to jump in, to fix a problem that isn't yours, to manage someone else's feelings, just stop. Take one deep breath. In that moment of stillness, ask yourself this simple question: is this actually my responsibility? Just asking the question can be enough to break that compulsive cycle. Second, start having a conversation with yourself, at least 3 times today. Maybe once in the morning, once at lunch, and once before bed. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? Beattie stresses this throughout the entire book. We become so incredibly attuned to everyone else's needs that we go completely deaf to our own. The answer might be ridiculously simple. A glass of water, 5 minutes of silence, a quick walk around the block. This isn't selfish. It's the fundamental practice of learning to care for the only person you're with 24 hours a day, yourself. Third, say no to one small thing. Find a low-stakes request this week, something you would normally agree to out of pure obligation or to avoid disappointing someone, and politely decline. You don't need some elaborate excuse. A simple, "I'm sorry I can't do that right now," is perfectly enough. Notice how it feels. It might feel uncomfortable, maybe even scary at first. But it's also the feeling of you taking back your own power, one small decision at a time. Ultimately, the journey described in Codependent No More isn't a journey toward selfishness. It's a journey toward wholeness. It's about understanding that you genuinely cannot pour from an empty cup. By learning to detach, to set boundaries, and to care for your own needs, you're not abandoning others. You're finally filling your own cup, so that the love and support you give comes from a place of genuine strength and abundance, not from a place of complete depletion and resentment. It's about learning that the most loving thing you can possibly do for anyone is to first be true to yourself. That was a summary of Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. We've covered the core ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the landmarks, but it can't give you the feeling of the sun on your skin or the sound of the local music. The true power of this book is in those quiet moments of reading it, when one of Beattie's stories, or a simple, honest phrase, suddenly makes you see your own life in a completely new light. This summary is your map. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity about the journey, I really encourage you to pick up the actual book. Reading it isn't just about learning concepts. It's an experience that can genuinely help you reclaim your own life. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, please take a moment to subscribe and maybe share it with someone who might need to hear this message. We're all on a journey of growth together, and the best way to travel is with good company. Thank you so much for listening, and let's keep learning together.